September 7th, 6:06 in the morning. Kyiv should have been waking up. Instead, 3 civilians, including a mother and her child, were killed as missiles slammed into the capital. Stay with me. Here's how Kyiv turned a dawn massacre into a daylight strategy that hit Russia's fuel lifeblood. Russia thought striking multiple cities at dawn would overwhelm defenses and crush morale. But by late afternoon, smoke was rising over a Russian oil hub. Ukraine had answered with precision, hitting the Ilsky Refinery and a Druzhba pipeline pumping station in Bryansk. These were not random targets. They cut directly at Russia's ability to sustain its war. The day began with fire over Kyiv. Let's look at how those first missiles tore into the capital. At sunrise, Russia's strike came with precision meant to unsettle. The first light over Kyiv wasn't morning calm, but the red arc of missiles and the buzz of incoming drones. You can picture it. Families reaching for breakfast, children rubbing sleep from their eyes, when the sirens cut in and a blast shook the ground. Striking at dawn was intentional. It's the hour when people are least prepared, routines still in motion, defenses not yet fully alert. It transformed ordinary moments into shock and panic before anyone reached cover. The assault came in waves, missiles and drones paired together, crashing toward the capital in volleys designed to saturate Kyiv's layered defenses. Radar, interceptors, and close-range guns came alive almost instantly, creating a wall of fire in the sky. Most were stopped, but one slipped through, a symbolically devastating hit. For the first time since Russia's full-scale invasion, a major government building in Kyiv was damaged. Windows blown out, flames rising, emergency crews battling smoke inside offices of governance. President Zelensky condemned it as a deliberate crime and prolongation of the war, while local officials stressed it was the first direct strike on a primary government complex since the invasion began. That detail alone signaled a shift. If one could get through, the lock wasn't secure. The cost in lives came almost at once. 3 civilians were killed, including a mother and her baby. At least 18 others were wounded across the city. Fires tore through homes, cars burned out, and residence blocks filled with smoke as neighbors carried the injured from stairwells. Ordinary streets became scenes of collapse and rescue. Stay with me. The response would come within hours, and it didn't target people. Kyiv wasn't the only city hit that morning. Strikes landed in Zaporizhzhia, Dnipro, Odessa, Kharkiv, and Kryvyi Rih. It was a coordinated campaign across Ukraine. That mattered because the attack wasn't just terror in one place. It stretched a blanket of fear over much of the country. A mother in Kharkiv pulling her children into a basement. A mechanic in Odessa watching tanks of fuel explode. Each lived the same dawn assault as those in Kyiv. The message was operational reach. Nowhere was off the map. But beyond destruction, Russia sought something deeper. Timing the strike with the start of day. Hitting a government building for the first time. This was about psychology. If you want to erode trust in defenses, you don't just hit supply depots. You touch symbols, ministries, offices, civic centers. You show that even the political heart cannot be fully shielded. It's the kind of move that injects doubt, making people wonder whether tomorrow morning's alarm will end differently. Emergency crews worked relentlessly to contain fires and evacuate survivors. Political leaders framed the blasts in stark terms, proof that Moscow had no interest in scaling back or negotiating. Kyiv read it as deliberate escalation, designed to prolong the conflict and grind morale. Strategically, Russia wanted people to wake up questioning whether defenses could hold every time. The objective wasn't just damage in material terms. It was the seed of doubt. For Moscow, the initiative belonged to them in the gray light of dawn. But by evening, the picture had flipped. Across the border, new images began to emerge. Not of apartment blocks or government roofs, but of industrial smoke rising over Russian ground. And that shift pointed to a response that would redefine the day. Hours after explosions tore through Kyiv, a different column of smoke began rising, this one inside Russia. Gray plumes coiled above the Ilsky Oil Refinery in the Krasnodar region. If Moscow's strikes at dawn were designed to spread fear, Ukraine's answer came aimed at the machinery of war. Ukraine's general staff announced via telegram that special operations forces had struck the Ilsky refinery. The choice of target made the intent plain. Infrastructure that fuels Russia's military, not civilian neighborhoods. The Ilsky plant wasn't just another industrial site. It was a key transfer point supplying occupied Crimea and Russian units across southern and eastern Ukraine. Ilsky processes up to about 6.42 million tons of oil per year, enough capacity to keep forward positions, transport convoys, even aircraft supplied with gasoline and diesel. Think of it this way: striking a refinery is like clipping the fuel veins of a mechanized army. You may not see tanks explode immediately, but you do set in motion shortages that grind down mobility. Moscow quickly tried to control the narrative. Russian officials insisted a drone crash had sparked only a minor fire, claiming there were no casualties and little disruption. But images told a harsher story. Heavy smoke poured into the sky, flames visible from the industrial grounds. The very need for Russian authorities to downplay damage underscored its importance. A refinery of this size isn't just another workplace, it is a node in an army's supply system. When it burns, the loss reverberates through fuel depots, convoys, and battle lines. For Ukraine, the decision was deliberate. Earlier that morning, Russian missiles had torn into apartments, killing civilians. Kyiv's counterstrike instead targeted energy assets directly linked to Russia's ability to sustain combat operations. The contrast was stark. Moscow pursued terror against people, while Ukraine's reported aim was to strike critical infrastructure vital to military logistics. That distinction carried weight both morally and operationally. From the battlefield perspective, the effect was immediate pressure. Modern forces survive on fuel. Tanks without diesel sit idle. Trucks without gasoline fail to reach artillery units. Aircraft without aviation fuel are grounded. Even temporary shortages disrupt rotations, delay reinforcements, and complicate defense. On sprawling fronts like those in southern Ukraine, a breakdown in supply doesn't just slow an army. It weakens its cohesion. The strike on Ilsky fit into a larger pattern of operational discipline. Ukraine did not lash out at symbolic sites for effect. It struck functional organs inside Russia's war machine. Repairing such damage is also uniquely difficult. Sanctions cut off access to specialized components. Even minor fires can cascade into lost capacity when critical parts must be sourced under global restrictions. For Moscow, every hit creates a longer shadow, widening the supply gap between what the military needs and what industry can reliably deliver. The symbolism mattered too. After air raid sirens and shattered apartments in Kyiv, seeing flames rise from across the border carried a sharp message. Russia's war would draw cost at home. Civilians in Ukraine bore the morning's trauma, but by evening, Russian territory was hosting the burn marks of retaliation. In videos circulating online, plumes from Ilsky became the visual proof that Ukraine could return fire against the very lifeblood of Russia's economy and army. This was more than reprisal. It was a preview of a broader strategy aimed at degrading Russia's capacity to sustain war. By deliberately going after fuel infrastructure, Ukraine forced the Kremlin to fight on an arena it cannot defend with trenches or missile barrages. This is the battle of logistics, slow-moving, unforgiving, and vital. As Ukraine struck facilities like Ilsky, it pulled the fight away from homes and cities and into the supply system that keeps Russia's front lines alive. And even then, Ilsky was just one part of a deeper campaign. Because hurting a single facility brings disruption, but touching the web that moves oil across Russia carries consequences on another scale entirely. Ukraine's follow-up struck not just a refinery, but the lines that feed it. The next hit landed inside Bryansk, where the LVDS 8N pumping station was damaged. LVDS 8N is part of the Druzhba pipeline complex, with a pumping capacity of about 10.5 million tons, a strategic artery moving oil west into Europe and south toward Belarus. Taking down a node like that was about more than breaking equipment. It sent pressure drops across a system that Moscow depends on for both war supplies and cash from exports. The Druzhba pipeline is no ordinary conduit under the soil. It is one of Russia's most vital energy assets, pushing crude from its interior fields into multiple states. Belarus leans on it. Hungary and Slovakia receive fuel through it. Export contracts that keep money flowing into Moscow are sustained by it. Hitting LVDS 8N meant targeting the economic and political bloodstream, not just a local depot. It was Kyiv showing that the war could extend into Russia's financial channels. And this was not the first strike in the chain. On August 13th, Ukrainian drones damaged the Unicha pumping station, also in Bryansk. Linking Unicha with LVDS 8N turned the picture into a campaign, a methodical pattern, first refining plants, then pumping stations, then transit nodes. The logic was clear. Ukraine was mapping choke points across Druzhba one by one. This was not a random escalation. It was strategy aimed at stretching Russia's vulnerabilities from the front line into the back end of its supply system. The reach extended beyond Russia's borders. Oil from Druzhba doesn't stop at Russian territory. It feeds Europe. Hungary and Slovakia, already nervous about energy dependence, saw their lifeline rattled. Both governments publicly asked Ukraine to stop striking Druzhba and pressed the European Commission to safeguard consistent supplies. That reaction underlined the geopolitical risk. A drone wreck in Bryansk could ripple into debates in Brussels and cause tension inside EU capitals. The battlefield was suddenly brushing against European politics. Kyiv's intent was to shift from isolated tactical hits to ones that stir global consequence. A truck destroyed at the front weakens a single unit. A pumping station 200 kilometers inside Russia pressures entire economies. It signals that Ukraine can impose costs outside the trench lines. And in modern conflict, that leverage matters just as much as ground control. Inside Russia, the fallout was already visible. By late August, analysts estimated that attacks on refineries had slashed about 17% of Russia's refining capacity. That figure translated into queues at the pump, supply gaps, and mounting civilian frustration. Politico reported long lines for fuel, while Ukrainian analysts said prices in some areas ran up to 20 to 25% higher than official rates. For ordinary Russians, that meant daily irritation layered on top of the war's economic strain. Discontent did not need bombs in city centers. All it required was for people to spend hours waiting to fill their cars. Repairing the damage has been slow. Sanctions limit access to crucial parts and advanced tools. Even small fires can bench whole systems for weeks, leaving engineers with no easy path back to full output. What begins as one strike snowballs into outages that stall production, delay shipments, and tighten domestic availability. Russia's war machine feels the strain, but so do its citizens, who see higher costs and shrinking supplies. The strikes also reshaped international conversations. European officials tracked the impact closely, balancing solidarity with Kyiv against fears of volatile energy markets. In Washington, policymakers flagged the attacks as evidence that Russia's long-term capacity could be eroded through targeted economic pressure layered on top of battlefield strikes. Each impact inside Bryansk or Krasnodar reverberated into policy debates thousands of kilometers away. What September 7th revealed was that energy targets created more than smoke. They created ripples, logistical, social, and diplomatic, that Moscow could not easily contain. The war was no longer only about missiles hitting cities or drones intercepting tanks. It was about whose systems could endure sustained pressure and whose would fracture under it. And that set the stage for what came next. September 7th underlined a new dimension of the war. Russia struck apartments at dawn, and by nightfall, Ukraine was burning an oil hub and disrupting a pipeline. The battlefield now stretches beyond trenches into refineries, pumping stations, and energy corridors that prop up Russia's military and economy. This account is drawn from battlefield statements and open reporting on the Ilsky and Druzhba strikes. The war now runs on systems. Hit the fuel lines and you degrade the front. That's why refinery and pipeline strikes matter. They convert battlefield pressure into economic and diplomatic pressure on Moscow. If this analysis matters to you, like and subscribe for sober, timely coverage. Tell us where you're watching from and what effect you think energy strikes will have on Russia's next offensive.